Most people don't quit at the beginning. They quit near the end. Not when it's chaotic, not when it's confusing, not when it's obviously hard. They quit when it becomes quiet. That's the phase nobody prepares you for. In the beginning, struggle feels justified. You're new, you're learning, you're allowed to be bad. There's excitement in starting, there's novelty in effort. Pain feels meaningful because it has a label: growth. But then something changes. The chaos disappears, the learning curve flattens, the excitement dies, and what replaces it is repetition. No praise, no feedback, no visible reward. Just the same actions again and again without proof that they're working. That's where most people leave, not because they failed, but because nothing dramatic happened. Most people are addicted to visible progress. They need evidence. They need reassurance. They need something to point to and say, "See, this is working." But real growth doesn't announce itself. It moves silently. Progress happens underground. Identity shifts quietly. Momentum builds invisibly. And that silence is unbearable for people who rely on external validation. Here's the brutal truth. If you need constant feedback to continue, you will never last long enough to win. Because the phase right before it works feels identical to the phase where nothing is happening. That's the trap. Most people misinterpret the quiet phase as failure. They think, if this was working, I'd feel different. If this was right, something would have changed by now. If I was meant for this, it wouldn't feel so dull. Those thoughts are not insight. They are panic. Panic caused by the absence of stimulation. In reality, the quiet phase is where discipline replaces excitement, where identity replaces motivation, where structure replaces emotion. And most people don't survive that transition. They mistake boredom for misalignment. They mistake slowness for incompetence. They mistake repetition for stagnation. So they stop. They change direction. They restart something new. They convince themselves they're listening to intuition. But intuition doesn't quit when things get boring. Fear does. Fear of wasting time, fear of being wrong, fear of committing without guarantees. Here's what nobody tells you. Every meaningful result is preceded by a stretch of doubt that feels irresponsible to tolerate. You feel stupid for continuing. You feel behind. You feel invisible. And that's exactly why quitting feels logical. Quitting restores stimulation. It creates a new beginning. It gives you a reason for the discomfort. You didn't fail, you just changed paths. That lie feels relieving. But every restart resets the clock. Most people aren't inconsistent because they're lazy. They're inconsistent because they're impatient with invisibility. They want proof before persistence, but proof comes after. Rich thinking understands this. Poor thinking rejects it. Rich thinking commits without evidence. Poor thinking demands evidence before commitment. That single difference decides who lasts long enough to compound. Compounding is boring in real time. Day 1 looks like nothing. Day 30 looks like nothing. Day 100 still looks like nothing. Then suddenly, it's obvious. And everyone asks, how did this happen so fast? It didn't. You just weren't watching. Most people don't quit because it's too hard. They quit because it's too quiet. No one notices them. No one praises them. No one validates the effort. And if your discipline depends on being seen, it collapses when you're ignored. That's why discipline must become private. Private standards, private routines, private promises. Because the world doesn't reward effort immediately. It rewards outcomes eventually. Most people cannot tolerate delayed validation. They need to feel special now. They need reassurance now. They need proof now. But the gap between effort and reward is where identity is built, and identity cannot be rushed. Most people quit right before it works because the last phase requires faith without emotion. No excitement, no hype, no novelty. Just repetition with no applause. This is where discipline stops being something you do and becomes something you are. And that transition feels like loss. You lose the excitement. You lose the adrenaline. You lose the feeling of starting something. But what you gain is far more powerful. Irreversibility. Once discipline becomes identity, quitting feels unnatural. But getting there requires enduring the most psychologically uncomfortable phase of growth. The phase where nothing feels rewarding, but everything is necessary. Most people never make it through that corridor. They turn back right before the door opens. And then they spend years wondering why nothing ever clicked for them. It did. They just left too early.